All right, this is the Pro Wrestling Illustrated podcast. I'm your host, PWI senior writer Al Castle, joined once again by my co-host, Brian Solomon. How's it going?
Going okay. I'm a little worse for wear and tired, as you probably are too, from staying up and watching the whole AEW pay-per-view last night.
Yeah,
and the press scrum too, by the way. So
I thought we were done with the days of the Sunday midnight pay-per-views, much less from AEW, but certainly worth staying up for. We'll talk about that in just a bit. And I got two distinguished wrestling authors with me this week. PWI contributor Pat Laprade. How are you?
Very good, very good. I didn't have to watch AEW yet because I had some other tapings that I had to attend last night. So maybe the 4 hour will become 3 hours if I fast forward a few things.
Isn't that the nice thing about like watching wrestling in the modern age? Is that really a show is kind of like as long as you want it to be, right?
Yeah, exactly.
For me,
exactly.
I've really quit like complaining about Raw being 3 hours because it certainly isn't 3 hours for me.
No way.
I agree.
I agree
with that.
It's often a handful of YouTube clips for me.
Yeah, it's DVR all the way for me. Like I can't even tell you when they had the 30th anniversary show. I actually sat down and watched it live, and I think it was the first time I had done that in years. I mean, I couldn't even tell you how long. It's always DVR for me. Sometimes I'll even like start watching it like about a half hour in on DVR, so that way I have a pocket of a cushion that I could fast forward if I want to without catching up to live.
Yeah, TV. I watch everything like that, like and stuff like that. Yeah, you got to. I mean, the real time is like 20 or 30 after the hour.
Right.
And, I mentioned in my column in the latest magazine like how different it is because it happens a few times a year now, but sometimes there's like 3 shows on top of each other. And there was a week there where it was I think Ring of Honor, NXT, and UFC all at the same time. And in the days of the Monday Night Wars, it was often like literally running between 2 TVs in the house, right? It's like you'd go to one room and then you'd go run to the other room. And now, for one thing, you could have them all right in front of you. I had a laptop, phone, TV, or you just go back to them whenever, which is really the way to go. Anyway, we got a lot of big shows certainly to talk about here. Revolution was just last night, AEW, a really spectacular main event that we'll touch on. But also coming up soon is WrestleMania. This is the first time we've talked since Elimination Chamber, which in its own right was much bigger than most Elimination Chambers and much bigger than most WWE pay-per-views that are not, the big 3 or 4. And we're going to talk a bit about the fallout from that. It's one of the reasons I wanted to have Pat on from Canada, and certainly a lot of Canadian wrestling fans not thrilled with the way things turned out. Did WWE screw the pooch, so to speak, in not putting the world title on Sami Zayn? We'll talk a bit about that in just a moment. But real quick, I want to tell you about the latest issue of Pro Wrestling Illustrated. I got mine in the mail. It is the May 2023 issue. On the cover, Mercedes Moné. Am I pronouncing it right? The former Sasha Banks. And a big feature in here about her return to wrestling in New Japan. A fun issue because it's sort of in between our big tent poles. We're not giving away awards in this. We're not ranking anything. So lots of space here to have some fun and take on some different stuff. The return of the PWI Roundtable, which you were part of, Brian. It was a recent podcast episode as well, where UI and Yumi and Kevin talked about the potential sale of WWE. We put it together for a feature in the magazine. Also coverage of Wrestle Kingdom of Julia winning the title over at Stardom. Of Muda's retirement. I want to talk a bit about that, maybe if we have some time also on the show, and a lot more. It's also our sort of like WrestleMania preview issue. What we did this year was talk to various notable stars from different industries about their WrestleMania memories. And there's some people from the music industry, some people from the wrestling industry, some current WWE stars, all sharing their favorite WrestleMania moments, and a lot more in here. Head on over to PWI-online.com and pick it up. You could download it. You can order it, have it delivered to your home. Whatever you do, the best value, the most savings is by subscribing. And the longer you subscribe, the deeper the savings. You could save half off the cover price. Head on over to PWI-online.com. Also, your one-stop shop for all things PWI, whether it is merch, You can check out the podcast there. So much more. All right, let's jump into it. Pat, I know because you're busy, you haven't seen Revolution yet, so don't want to leave you out of the conversation. Feel free to jump in however, whenever you want.
I've seen the results. I know some of the stuff that happens. Yeah, sure, no problem.
Yeah, it was a long show, and I got to tell you, Brian, as we were just talking about, I don't love wrestling shows that are going to midnight on Sunday. So when the main event starts at whatever it was, I mean, it was maybe 10:30, 10:45, and I'm thinking, oh my God, yeah, I've got at least another hour from here. It was like, oh my gosh, and it was, not to nitpick some, as we sometimes do about AEW style. It was a lot to take in through the night, right? We had already seen so much, a lot of blood, a lot of crazy spots, just kind of like you're sort of like exhausted from all of it. And then you have this 1 hour match. So even though I know both those guys were super talented, there was part of me that was a little down for it. But man, did they pick me up. And by the end of it, I was wide awake and absolutely loving it. We talked briefly before we recorded. You said it might be AEW's best match ever. I'd have to think about it, but it's certainly near the top. I mean, and for me, certainly the athleticism, the execution of the match was great, but it really was about the story that was told and the creation. And people might quibble at this because he's already the world champion. He's already a top guy. But to me, this was kind of MJF's real coming out party, and where he was able to prove to some of the doubters, and maybe I'm in that camp, that he absolutely belongs, and just a fantastic performance by both of them. MJF, I think in particular, really shined, and it's great when a match is designed for a certain purpose and delivers on that. And to me, and maybe you could trace this all the way back to AEW signing Bryan Danielson, and the idea being, a guy who's already in or around his 40s with this great reputation. So much of the reason you sign him is going to be to make new stars. And that's a tricky thing. It's sort of easier said than done. And it's not just about having him put guys over. This to me is how you do it, right? I mean, it was, I was thinking last night of like, and this is kind of the example that comes up a lot, like Hogan and Kidman years ago, remember? And Hogan loses to Billy Kidman, didn't really make, Billy Kidman at all. This to me is sort of the blueprint for how you use an established star to create a new star. And I just love this match.
Yeah, it felt like this was kind of like what Bryan Danielson is there to do. Finally, after all this time of going, like, what are they doing with him? Why is he there? They're kind of wasting him. He's kind of languishing. This felt like, okay, that's why he's there. And with MJF, like you said, I mean, look, MJF. I'm not the first one to say this, and I don't take pleasure in saying this, but he had actually lost steam since becoming champion, not gained steam. He'd lost steam. And part of that is because the guy wasn't doing much. I noted that this was his second title defense. He won the title in November. You know what I mean? But he really, this was a statement. I mean, it's easy to say, it's so tempting to always say, oh, this is the best match ever. This is the best this ever. And I might not 100% stand by that, but that certainly was the impression I got when it was over. Like, I always go by what I call like the casual fan or even the non-fan perspective. Like sometimes at these pay-per-views and shows, like I usually have a bunch of people over, like I still kind of bake it into a thing. And, I had people there who really don't watch a lot of wrestling or care a lot about it. And they got invested in this. Like, to me, that's always like a sign that something is special. They were sort of like, wow, they actually started talking about it as they were watching it, as if it was, an actual competitive contest. Like that's how much they were getting into it. These are people what I mean is they were able to suspend their disbelief, which is the goal. The thing with AEW is, for whatever people might want to say, and they have detractors, and I don't believe they're as strong as they were, say, a year or two ago. But the one thing that you can never take away from them is they know how to put on a hell of a pay-per-view. Like, their pay-per-views always deliver, even if it's not incredible from beginning to end or top to bottom, and even if they go a little long, there's enough on there to make you walk away and go, I got my money's worth out of this show. Like I thought from last night, look, the highlights for me, it's the Iron Man match, the Texas Death Match, and which I did not see coming. Although I should have with Jeff Jarrett, was the 4-way tag team match. Like when they put that one on right before the main event, I was just like, oh my God, could we just get to the Iron Man match already? But I wound up enjoying the hell out of it. And Jeff Jarrett is just, that whole match, it was like Jeff Jarrett conducting like a symphony, basically, was the way that it came off. And so there's enough in there that I was loving it. I mean, you can quibble that they shouldn't have done this blood-soaked Texas Death Match before the Iron Man match, which was also blood-soaked. You know, like I could almost hear Jim Cornette in my head saying that. But that it's a quibble to me. Like I thought the match was great. I thought the show was solid. There was filler on it, like always, but it was a very memorable show.
Yeah, I really agree. I mean, I also had the thought about all the blood. I don't know. You know, we say it a lot. If it works, it works. On paper, you shouldn't have 2 matches back to back with so much blood, but they both were really effective. They're both really good. They're both really over with the crowd. So it's hard to say that you shouldn't have done it in one or the other because it worked in both. So that's fine. What I loved about the main event in particular was that the Iron Man, the story of, and it was built for weeks, of MJF being out of his element in this kind of match and him being such a dirtbag, heel, that him just constantly being inclined to take shortcuts and to cheat, and the rules of that match kind of not allowing him to, because you'd fall behind on the count. And that was really the payoff right at the end when he grabs the title belt. And yeah, you could knock him out, but then you're going to lose because he'll be up one fall. And him being forced to sort of be a wrestler and then show that he could do it, right? So it kind of took him out of his element, but he showed that, if you put me in a position to have to wrestle the best wrestler in the world, I'll hold my own. And he did that, with also doing some shortcuts and some cheating stuff, and the stuff with the kid, which I guess is a little controversial today.
I think the kid will live. I mean,
yeah, I still don't love some nuances of the MJF character, but this was the best version of that character that I've seen. And they went an hour and 7 minutes. And you talk about being up at midnight, and then it ends in I'm sorry, these are spoilers for you, Pat.
Oh no, I've seen the results. I'm fine.
Yeah, I mean, it ends in a draw, so they go into the overtime, and this wasn't 30 seconds of overtime. This was another 7 minutes or so. So
yeah,
now we're
7 minutes.
Really pushing it. But never boring. It made me think of like those original Iron Man matches, and how by necessity so much of it was like, well, we'll do the chin lock here, and that'll last for a few minutes, and we'll get our breath, and then we'll get going again. And there was none of that. I mean, this was really action packed from beginning to end, but also not overkill, right? It wasn't like and I liked some of the touches of like MJF having to take water breaks and stuff, and then getting oxygen. It really drove home that this is like a real exhausting athletic, feat that they're having to put on here.
Right. And what Danielson was doing was great too, which was, and part of this is just working the match too, but I do believe there's a root of reality in this too. Is it was so interesting and different to me how Danielson through the match was selling basically the idea that he was still doing okay. Like no matter how much time went by, he was smiling. He was in there like, MJF is flopping around like a dying fish. And he's just, it's 50 minutes in, 60 minutes in, and he's still like almost laughing. There was one point in the overtime where they were, they were head to head literally and bleeding like crazy. And they had their faces turned opposite directions. MJF is crying and Bryan Danielson is laughing.
Yeah.
I mean, that was like the distillation of the whole match to me right there, that moment.
Right. And it makes it that much more effective when not only does MJF win, but he makes him tap out,
Right.
So his own move. So really fantastic stuff. Pat, certainly I could ask you this part, where do you go from here? I mean, do you feel that they need to stay on the MJF train for the foreseeable future? Looks like maybe Adam Cole is getting built up for that next big opponent. What do you think of that?
I mean, MJF. I was thinking ahead before Revolution. I was like, please let the belt on MJF. You know, I think you need to establish him as much as you can. Maybe not in the way WWE does with Roman Reigns. It doesn't have to go 900 plus days, but I think that with the match that you guys just talked about, and you know, he delivered and everything, I think he should be the champion for a little while again. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I would probably see him go against another or two feuds before maybe losing the title. I mean, let him with the belt. Let him be your number one guy for a while, and that's, you know, depending on, you know, when his contract is going to end and you know what he's going to do. I mean, I would push him to the top until he decides what he wants to do, you know. But I mean, I don't see. I wouldn't make him lose the belt for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on somebody emerges and really, you know, catches fire, that you've got to kind of move on. I don't know who that would be. I mean, I do think it. I guess we're done with Bryan Danielson for now. I mean, you could run this back, I'm sure, but I'm fine with him kind of moving on to something else.
I got a sense in the press scrum because they were asking him about future challengers, and you know, I mean, it was like, I don't know if you saw any of it, but it was almost like he was intentionally doing a parody of the CM Punk meltdown. It was very surreal because he was clearly in character, you know, right? But it was still this profanity-laced thing. And instead of eating muffins, you know, because he's Jewish, of course, he's sitting there eating pickles and munching on these pickles, and he won't stop talking about how good they are. And but when they were asking him about challengers, the feeling I got, I could be totally off base, was that they might be heading towards Adam Page, because that was the person where he stopped and really went into detail about, you know, how much he hates him and all this, and how he brought out the fact that he originally won the diamond ring from him. He mentioned a lot of other people too, including Adam Cole, but I just got a feeling that Page might be the one that they're leaning towards next.
Well, if it's Page, but if it's Page, I would keep the belt on MJF then.
I agree.
Because,
no, I agree
we cannot say that Adam Page reign was the best AEW had.
No.
So I mean, let him. I mean, in a feud with MJF, no problem. But you know, I mean, there's going to be other challengers after that for sure.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously it was a big night for Page as well. The AEW faithful, you know, love the guy, but as you touched on, Pat, something I think is still missing there, right? I mean, for the mainstream fans, maybe hard to put my finger on it, but it's not fully formed, and I don't doubt that they could make for some good television, the two of them. It doesn't feel, and you could, I mean, I suppose you could do Double or Nothing, headline it with Page and MJF. I think you'd need a big some support from the undercard on that one, because yeah, I don't know, at least in the mainstream, how box office that is.
Yeah, I mean, but that's always AEW, right? It's always a strong undercard, whatever the main event is, you know. So, but yeah, for Double or Nothing, they usually have probably their strongest card of the year. But you could go with MJF and Page, you know, with something else, you know, and with the Bucks and Omega, and you know, you have enough talented workers there to make it work, even if MJF and Page are main eventing, and you know, who knows, you know, maybe there's going to be new people coming in before the end of May, you know. So Ibushi could be one, maybe, or you know, you never know who's going to show up sometimes. So but yeah, I mean if it's Page, I mean, that means MJF would still be champion over the summer. So then we're heading to New Japan and AEW thing, and then regular schedule in fall. So I mean, that would mean at least that MJF could be champion till the end of the year, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I know Tony Khan's teasing his latest big announcement. I don't know when that's coming.
Another one?
Yes, I know. I mean, talk about going to the well too many times. I mean, did he learn nothing from like Dixie Carter? And
not only that, but the last one. And look, that's the thing. Some of these announcements and things, they're cool things. But the way it's presented, it's almost like you set people up to be disappointed or upset.
Yep.
You could almost feel
yeah.
Well, you could feel the deflation of the crowd when they just did the all access thing, which that shouldn't happen because I mean, it's a new show. It's probably going to be interesting, but the way they positioned it, you could just feel the crowd was just like, "Oh my God, it's this."
It reminds me when Tony Schiavone always said that it was the best Nitro ever. I mean,
Yes.
if every announcement is a huge announcement, then there's no huge announcement.
Yes.
It's like it's just another one.
Right, absolutely. So anyhow, a really good show, a really good showing for AEW. They obviously needed it, lost some momentum. The momentum's been on WWE side for a number of months right now. So I think it was AEW's best night in a while. And like you said, Brian, they always come through on these pay-per-views. I mean, I don't remember a time where there was a bad AEW pay-per-view, right? I mean, some have been better than others, but I don't remember one where it was certainly. I mean, what you deal with WWE fairly often, where it's just kind of at the end of the night you're sort of deflated.
They don't do as many, and I think that's probably to their benefit. I mean, they do 4, I think it is, and WWE is still they've pulled it in slightly, but I think it's still like 10 a year or something like that.
Yeah. I guess you're taking March off, right?
Yeah.
And then
it's a lot. It's a lot.
AEW has 5 now with New Japan with the New Japan one.
Yeah. So anyhow, good night for them.
Right.
We did want to talk about WWE for sure, and kind of combining both Elimination Chamber and the hype for WrestleMania. I've got a lot to say about this, so I'm gonna try not to hog the mic, and I'll jump right over to you guys. A few weeks ago, we had Elimination Chamber, a ton of build for Sami Zayn and Roman Reigns. Really, the most kind of big fight feel that I can remember for a long time. And a terrific match, certainly an emotional climax. They made the decision not to put the title on Sami and kind of stay on the course with Cody Rhodes. A lot of second guessing, a lot of folks thinking, the stars were aligned that night, a real special night in Montreal with Sami. Even if it wasn't the plan, do you call the audible and change course and take advantage of all the circumstances? They ultimately didn't. And as I touched on, a lot of people wondering if that was the right decision. Pat, I'll ask you, was that the right call?
I'll say yes, because the right call is the long-term plan call. And as far as long-term, that was not the plan was not to go with Sami. It's probably to go with Cody, but whoever, even if Cody doesn't win at Mania, the long-term call was to bring Roman as champion at WrestleMania. And I mean, what options did you have? Sami wins it at Elimination Chamber and lose it on TV prior to Mania. I would have not liked that. A short reign of a Sami Zayn as champion would is really what people would have wanted to. I mean, people would have complained that Sami got a few weeks or a month old reign. I mean, they didn't expect Sami to cut up that much. It was a very nice surprise, I think, for them. I mean, it was a very special night. I was there, and guys, I know Sami for 20 years. It was a very special night for a bunch of us. He didn't win the title. It would have made it more special, especially for Montreal, especially in Montreal. But at the same time, I understand that they have long-term things to do. And I mean, look at what they're doing ever since. I mean, you can feel that they're taking their time for Sami and Kevin to reunite. I'm expecting that big pop, when they're gonna hug in the middle of the ring, because one of them will save the other, and that what will build to the Uso match at Mania. And you know what? At the end of the day, if they win the titles from the Usos at WrestleMania, that's not a bad ending.
No.
And perhaps they're gonna still be champion for a longer time than Sami would have been as champion if he would have beaten Roman. So, I understand the long-term plan that they have, that Sami wasn't the guy, Cody was. It's a completely different scenario than when they added Daniel Bryan into the mix a few years ago. It's not the same thing at all. It's not the same main event that they're going to have that they had prior to Bryan being put in. So, it would have been, like I said, it would have been a crazy thing live, but it would have been a pop for one night. And I was always a big fan of long-term stuff. And I don't think Sami would have been a long-term plan. So I prefer that they do something else with him. They keep telling the same story, but with different actors. And there you go.
Yeah, I really agree. And as you touched on, if you sort of like play it through what the different scenarios could have been if you put the title on Sami there, none of them really work. You could do a triple threat, I guess, with Sami going in as champion. But Cody beating Sami for the title doesn't mean as much. Roman getting it back at WrestleMania would be kind of deflating. So none of them are really, or getting the title back on Roman before WrestleMania, that also kind of stinks. So none of it really works. Brian,
the other thing, just before letting you go, Brian, the other thing too is that to me, this angle, of course, it was a lot about Sami and Roman. But there are other actors in it. The Usos were great in there, and Kevin was great as well. So if you only put Sami, let's say, in a three-way with Roman and Cody, what's left for the Usos? What's left for Kevin? Yep. You need to tell a different story for them, because now they don't have anything to do. And Kevin teaming with somebody else against the Usos would have not felt compelling enough, So I'd rather see this, and the story keeps continuing, around 4 of the 5 players that we had, with the Usos, Kevin and Sami. So I'd rather see that keep going than seeing something with only Sami and forgetting about all the rest.
Yeah, really agree with all that. Brian, are you on the same page here?
I actually am. I was expecting we were going to have this whole drag out argument or whatever.
Pat, supposed to be
no. Well, Pat, I don't think Bertrand agrees with you, Pat. You guys,
I know that.
Get on the same page.
I know that.
He was not happy, but no, but that's the thing. I do agree with what you said. It has to be what the long-term plan is. There was such a temptation to do it. I even felt it myself. I was thinking, oh, just do it. It'll be fine. But they held their ground. The Sami thing was just originally supposed to be a joke, as we know. Sami was still doing the conspiracy theory gimmick. It was supposed to be like a one-off ridiculous thing. Oh, here's this ridiculous guy who's trying to hang out with the cool clique or whatever. But it turned into a phenomenon. But still, what I see it as, and I don't want to overextend the analogy, but in this scenario, the best case scenario, Sami Zayn is like Mankind, in the Attitude Era, where like you could do the feel good. You want to do the feel good title change, you can do it, but you're not going to really keep it on him. That's not really a long-term thing. He's not a long-term champion. You do it for the pop, you do it for the feel-good moment. And the booking, as we all know, in the Attitude Era was much more short attention span. It didn't have the same kind of discipline that they have now. In fact, if they were doing it now, Mick might not even have gotten a chance to be champion, but they're staying the course, and it makes sense. And you see it now, because now we're past it. And they're still on fire with Cody and Roman. And at least for me and probably other people watching it, I'm going, yeah, they definitely made the right decision, because in fact, my only thing that I would have said to not do or do differently from how they did is I think they tipped their hands a little too much that Sami wasn't winning, even though we knew he wasn't. But when they did that incredible Cody and Paul Heyman segment, where I know they were trying to sort of, with Cody saying, "Oh, I think I might be facing Sami at WrestleMania," but clearly they were just kind of leapfrogging over the Elimination Chamber, and I felt like that could have waited until after Elimination Chamber. But all in all, it's about the big picture. If you have Sami win, you get your feel-good moment, and let's say, whatever, he loses it back to Roman or something, and then Roman loses it to Cody, well, you've still spoiled it in a way, because the whole big thing is going to be who stops Roman Reigns. So if he already got beat before Cody beats him, right, it's just not quite the same thing, because like we talked about, Al, about one day at some point doing Roman versus The Rock. I at this point, I do not believe that's ever going to happen. But if it did, that's a match where you don't need the title. Like Reigns could be dethroned by that point, and it's still an incredible marquee main event match. But with Cody, you need the title. Like, that's the story. Like, they keep hammering home, finish the story. It's Cody winning the belt. So this was the right decision.
The only way I would have seen Sami winning is if they would have decided to split the titles.
Right, which I'm also glad they didn't do.
Which isn't also great, right? Yeah, all these are a lot of, not great options.
No, but you could have, make something that Roman would have lost because of Kevin Owens, so it's not like a clean win, but people in Montreal would have not mattered for 1 second that, Sami didn't win clean because of Kevin's involvement. And then you can go on with Cody at Mania and for the other belt. But again, I agree that the thing that is working so well for Roman is that he is the invincible champion right now. So if he loses, even if it's not clean, that's still a loss. So I understand that as well. But that's the only, I think, option they could have gone with, and maybe it wasn't the right option. And I mean, at the end of the day, we've seen it with other kind of baby faces champions, like Kofi. I mean, was Kofi hottest after or before he won the title?
Definitely before,
yeah, exactly. So I would have not liked Sami to be the champion and then losing steam after being the champion. It would have they kind of. I would have preferred them to keep him hot. And I think right now, and we saw it on live TV, he's still hot. And when they do that thing with the Usos and everything, I mean, people will react in a big way, I'm sure. And who knows? It could even main event night one of WrestleMania. I mean, to me, it's between that match and the Charlotte and Rhea match.
I don't even think there's a question. I mean, when I hear them talking about headlining with Charlotte and Rhea, I think it would be a huge mistake. I mean,
I think so
too. I don't think they're over nearly at that level.
No, and there was the last time we had a main event, a tag team main event at WrestleMania was WrestleMania 1.
Right.
So it's about time we have. And I understand putting women, in the main event is important as well, but they had main events in the past few years. You didn't have a tag team.
And it has to be organic. They have to be over. The fans have to demand it. I just don't think they have a women's match this year that it is worthy of that position. If anything, I think Bianca and Asuka is going to get a better reaction. So I'd sooner put that on last, but I don't think either come. You put aside Cody and Roman, and even Roman and Sami. Those are the two big matches. This is the next big match I think WWE could do all year. In Owens and Sami versus Usos. It is not just a pay-per-view worthy main event, but it's a WrestleMania worthy main event. It's that big a deal.
And it's a storyline too. You have the Usos losing the title night one, you have Roman losing the titles night two. I mean, that's the end of the bloodline, not the end of it, but they're both being, or three of them being defeated, for once. So that's the story going to Mania, and then you do rematches maybe after Mania, and then you go you go elsewhere with them.
Yeah. Well, and I mean they've made Roman so strong now, which is again why I think they did the right thing. He is so strong coming out of that you still have, and I think these people are deluded, but you still have a lot of people saying, "Oh, it's too soon for Cody. He's not going to win now. Roman's going to win." But that's partly because of the booking that he's so strong. But the thing with Sami and Kevin, I mean that would be the perfect, not ending, but I mean the perfect place to go with their story, to have it be the main event of night one. They've been building it so much and drawing it out. They didn't do the reunion right away. A lot of people thought it was going to happen at Elimination Chamber, right? It didn't really happen there. It felt like it was almost going to happen. Now they're doing the thing with where is Jay's loyalty and all that. So, it's definitely worthy. I also think once you get past WrestleMania, because a lot of people were saying, well, this sucks because, Roman was the bully. He pushed Sami around. Sami fought back and he lost. Like, how demoralizing is that? Well, look, I mean, once you get the belt off of Roman, you can do a rematch, and a strong rematch where there's no title involved, where Sami does win. And I think at some point they should do that, but just not with the title involved. That's all.
Yeah. I got a lot of thoughts. First, one thing when you hear these folks saying, again, they should have called an audible, they should have cashed in on the special moment. Remember that some of these same folks were saying the same thing about Drew McIntyre a few months ago with Clash at the Castle. And imagine if they did that there, we wouldn't have any of this, right? So you do have to have like that long view, and and so much of this conversation really speaks to what a good job WWE has been doing, that these moments keep on coming up where there's this feeling of, oh, well, it can't get better than this. And then they top themselves, and there is something bigger and better. And so it is this delayed gratification. And they were right not to put the title on Drew, and they were right not to put the title on Sami Zayn. And the thing is, why a lot of people have like these really strong feelings about the Sami Zayn storyline is because they talk about, the long-term build, and the fact that, they were planting the seeds for this Sami Zayn storyline a year ago. In some ways, of all these different combinations, it's the shortest storyline, right? Because when you talk about Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn, this is a story that goes 20 years now, right? And through the world, through Ring of Honor, through the Canadian Independence, to WrestleMania, and on and on. I mean, it is one of the longest storylines in wrestling history, is this relationship between Sami and Kevin. And this is, I think, the right climax of them reuniting, taking down the Bloodline, dethroning the longest reigning tag champions in the history of WWE. There's the storyline of the Usos. And when you think about the birth of the Bloodline, before there was a Bloodline, there was Roman and Jay. And this is how all of this started, and their storyline from years ago. And this is kind of the payoff to that too. And this, the dynamic of, is Jay in or is he out? Where do his loyalties lie? This is all masterful storytelling. And then you can argue the one with the longest storyline of all is Cody Rhodes. And it depends, you could kind of start the clock wherever. You could make the argument that it is a 50-year storyline, dating back to Dusty not winning the WWF championship. But at the very, when I think about where Cody is right now, coming up on this moment, I think about him inducting his father in the Hall of Fame, and seeing Cody as like the first that most of the world saw Cody, and you saw in him so much of Dusty, and you could tell that, this guy was going to be something someday, through the legacy, the ups and downs, Stardust, and how deflating that was, and winning the tag title with his brother, and Dusty dying, and him, leaving WWE. And it was such a bold move at the time, and making that list, and All In, and the creation of AEW, and
which he hinted at, by the way, in his promo, right?
These are, if this was a movie, these would all be parts of the movie, and this is now the climactic scene. And the added intrigue of the idea that Roman was Dusty's star pupil, and that he sees him more as a son than he saw Cody, or at least teasing that. It's all fantastic, and we wouldn't have that if they went with Sami. And really, this way you really do get to have your cake and eat it too, because all of this is great. I wouldn't want to lose any of it. And especially WrestleMania now being 2 nights, you need 2 worthy main events, and I think you've got them. And 2 excellent main events that kind of come out of the same storyline, with the Bloodline, which is the best thing WWE's done in ages. I think WWE and Triple H deserve all the credit in the world for crafting the storyline and have it climax where it should climax at WrestleMania.
Rarely a storyline can actually bring you 2 top main events like we might have on both nights of WrestleMania. I mean, with Cody and Roman, and with Kevin and Sami against the Usos. I mean, that's the Bloodlines dividing itself to main event both nights. I mean, there's something there that we didn't have on other WrestleManias that, ever since WWE is doing 2 nights. And I think there's something there, and I think the right call would be to put the tag main eventing night 1, definitely. And as far as Cody goes, if he doesn't win that, I think that's going to be a mistake, though, because there's always a peak of where Roman can actually go, and you're going to miss it if Cody doesn't win it on the biggest night of your year. And even if they wait till SummerSlam and do a screw job finish or whatever, on night 2 of Mania, I think you're going to miss on something if Cody doesn't win it then.
That also assumes, though, that Cody is that over when that match gets in the ring. So far, so good. It really is gratifying to see him go in there with Roman, who is beloved, right? Beloved as a heel. But because of that, it is difficult to kind of play against him as the babyface. And the crowd is still very much behind Cody. They're buying it. I think on your point, Brian, again, this is nitpicky stuff. But I do think I agree with you that promo with Paul Heyman, that's the kind of thing you do after Elimination Chamber. And it would have worked after Elimination Chamber. Sure. And then what we saw since then, some of the other interplay with him and Paul, and then that fantastic segment with Roman, you could have pushed it a week or 2 afterwards. But Cody has not been as good as he was that week with Paul Heyman. The segment with Roman on SmackDown from Friday night, to me, that was all about Roman, and Roman just hit the home run of all home runs. I thought he was so good in that, so smug. I love the again, and I was thinking about this, and we joked about this, and I told my wife when we were watching it, like, if Vince McMahon was booking this segment, it would have ended with somebody getting hit by a car backstage. They wouldn't have left it alone. But I loved that it ended in a handshake, and that there is this. I just saw. No spoilers, but I just saw Creed 3 over the week. I watched it yesterday. Fantastic movie. But it's hard to even talk about it without any spoilers. But this is all to say that there is a way to tell a story about a big fight where somebody doesn't want to hit somebody with a car, where it's about professional respect and competition and wanting to be the best and legacy.
And you can still do it with a face and a heel. It doesn't have to be like 2 guys who love each other. You could still have a good guy and a bad guy, but not have it be this over-the-top nonsense. Yes.
One of the things we did for the new episode of Pro Wrestling Illustrated, I mentioned talking to some folks about the WrestleMania memories, and there's a section that is talking to Drew McIntyre and Carmelo Hayes about WrestleMania 18 and The Rock versus Hulk Hogan, and there's so much fondness for that match, rightfully so. I was in the building. It really was a magical experience, and people talk about that face off and all the history and legacy between those 2 guys, and people forget that the angle that set that up, which was you remember The Rock and Hogan in the ring and brother and all that stuff. How did that end? With somebody getting hit by a car in a backstage. I mean, I forget, did they drive a truck into The Rock or something like that? And nobody remembers that part of it. I think it's sort of like selective amnesia because that didn't help matters. This is all to say that I worry a little bit because we do have a little less than a month to go. Pat, how do you think they fill this time between now and WrestleMania? Where else can this go?
I mean, you're gonna get a lot of promos, with Paul, with Roman, with Cody. I wouldn't even. I'm not even sure if they need to touch another. I mean, I wouldn't do. I feel like you're gonna do like, I don't know, 1 week a Superman punch and the other week a Crossroads, and just to give each other like something before Mania, but. I don't feel like they need that. I think there's 3 guys who can actually do great promos, and you need to have both of them in the ring at the same time at one point. But at the same time, I don't feel like they need to do that usual stuff that they always do. And depending on who wins, the other one gets gets the upper end, the SmackDown before, the Raw before. I think there's a way of doing this differently as far as creative. And I mean, the fact that Paul Heyman is involved in those decisions and those booking decisions and all that wants me to say that it might be very good till WrestleMania, and I'm expecting it to be very good. It's the big match that you have, so I mean, you better make sure that you do the right things, and the important thing is to keep Cody as over as he is up until WrestleMania, because I don't remember which WrestleMania it was. But there was a WrestleMania where between the announcement of the championship match and the actual WrestleMania, the challenger had lost steam. And I'm wondering if it's not Kofi, actually, but I can be.
I think that sounds like a lot of WrestleManias, frankly.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. So they have a chance now. And you were talking about Cody's promo with Paul Heyman, but I mean, I understand your point. I'm just asking, would Cody be this over without that promo as we speak? Because
I agree. I think they should have, and I think Brian and I both think that they should have done it, and it was fantastic. It's the timing of it, and I think
because of the Sami main event,
right? Yeah,
but they did the Sami Cody promo the following week,
which wasn't as effective to me. I mean, it was very good.
It was very good. I agree. It wasn't as effective. I agree with this.
I think because people weren't buying that you were going to do Cody and Sami at WrestleMania. I don't think anybody bought that.
I think they did that as a reaction to what happened with the Heyman one, to sort of like correct a little bit and make sure that Sami wasn't completely being overlooked. Like, I think that's why that was done.
No, but it kept Sami strong up until Elimination Chamber. Yeah. So it played at least that role. So yeah, I think the key of whatever they'll end up doing is keep Cody strong up until WrestleMania, because you don't want him to lose steam in the last 3 weeks before probably, the biggest match of his career.
The one thing I'd love to see, I don't think it's doable, but if ever the two sides could play nice and make a deal, is have Dustin appear. I mean, a segment with Dustin and a pep talk for his little brother and talking about Cody would just be magical.
I think there was a time where Tony would have allowed something like that, but I think he's been burned by WWE now. Yeah. And he now understands that these are not my friends. Like, I think there was a time where he was a little more naive. I think the Billy Gunn thing might have been like the turning point with the DX reunion where he was like, yeah, you could have him. I just need you to just write, AEW superstar on the screen. And they were like, nope. And he thought, and also the Regal thing, the thing with Triple H kind of gloating on Twitter about William Regal. I think that was the line where he's like, all right, screw these people. I'm not helping them out anymore.
Maybe there's a way, and maybe it would be cheesy, but you were saying this and I just thought of top of my head. But those you go to a concert, let's say, I've seen this with Celine Dion once, and she was like singing with old timers, just an hologram of that person, that singer, and maybe there's a way of doing something with Dusty, like to do a montage, to do something where Dusty is actually almost like he was talking to Cody, but just do something with all the great promos that he did. Do something with this where the way you put words, it's like if he was actually telling Cody something. I think there's maybe something to do instead of, because I agree with Brian. I don't think that they'll ever get Dustin, but maybe there's a way of doing something with Dusty.
And you could even play into the fact that he's got a connection, as has been spoken about, with both of them, And I'm sure there actually is footage of Dusty working with Roman, as a rookie.
Yeah.
I think that would be interesting to show in combination, almost like he's looming over this entire match, and it's not just Cody, it's actually both of them in this weird way. I think that would be an interesting thing to do, even with like a video package or something.
Especially with what Eamon said, at the end of his promo with Cody, you're his favorite, you're his son, but I mean, Roman was always his favorite or something like this. So there's something to be done there. I agree with that.
And actually, Pat, you made me think of the fact that there's also the connection, as has been talked about, with Dusty and Heyman. I mean, and now that WWE owns everything, they could include footage of Dusty working ECW. And I'm sure at some point there, I can't think off the top of my head, there's got to be footage of Dusty and Heyman, in Jim Crockett Promotions or something where early in Heyman's career as a manager where they cross paths. There's got to be something, and to just show like Dusty's kind of shadow over everything, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, and I think they've done a nice job. I mean, Cody's never reluctant to bring up his father, but this is the first storyline that is really kind of all in on the legacy of the Rhodes family and the passing of Dusty, and it's been played so well. I love that. Again, I mean, not to dump on Vince McMahon too much, but I do think that if he was more hands-on, it would be Roman Reigns saying, "I'm glad your father's dead," and and all that. And it wasn't that at all. You've got Roman Reigns, the biggest heel in the company, putting him over. Talked about how much love and respect he had for him, and how he was the first one that really believed in him and put him on this course to greatness. It's just great. I mean, it's such subtle, smart storytelling. I can't say enough good things about it.
Seems Al, like you didn't have much faith in Vince McMahon's booking.
Well, maybe that's a good transition to the rest of the card. And Vince is back in some capacity. There's all kinds of speculation about how involved he is or he's not. I think what a lot of people's kind of antenna went up about was when they announced Omos versus Brock Lesnar, which a lot of people say this is very much a Vince McMahon match. And I think there's other things throughout the WWE product. Certainly, the whole Bray Wyatt thing, clearly Vince McMahon at some point at least was a fan of before he got rid of him. But I'll ask you both. I mean, what do you think about sort of the rest of the card? Is it feeling WrestleMania worthy? And does it feel like Vince McMahon's fingerprints are on it?
Go ahead, Brian.
Well, I think it's easy to say Omos and Brock. Okay, that's got to be Vince because it's two big giant guys. I'll put it this way. I think it's something that Vince would do. I do, but I'm not convinced. It's got to be a little more than that. If it was revealed that, Omos was sleeping with Sable, then I would say, okay, this is Vince McMahon, right? This is Vince McMahon.
Wow.
But I mean, even if that is the one bone they're throwing him just to keep the old guy happy, let him have it. Let him have his big giant match, because I think Vince has been, we all know, as we've learned the hard way in recent weeks, that he could basically do whatever he wants. And if he wanted to just step in and take everything over, he could. And I think maybe, just maybe, he's actually using his head and going, you know what, this is going well, and this is my company, and I'm making a lot of money off this, and I'm going to let them do their thing because this is actually going well, and I'm going to swallow my pride. that might be what's happening. As far as the other stuff on the card, I mean, this is a very, very solid card. I think both of you could always fantasy book. I would have probably done Rhea and Bianca. Fine, whatever. But I think what they're doing, those are going to be really strong matches with Rhea Ripley and Charlotte Flair. You have the history there where, they've met at WrestleMania before and Rhea was kind of, basically humbled. And Bianca and Asuka, I think Asuka needs to win that. That'd be to really get her character back on track again. I do, and I don't think Bianca will be hurt by it like she was by the Becky Lynch thing. I think that's sort of like the culmination of the rehabilitation of Asuka in a way. But I mean, the stuff with Dominic and Ray, I mean, again, the discipline and the patience to not just throw them at each other immediately, to put some space between them, put them on different shows, get them temporarily involved in different angles, have people wondering if they're ever going to wrestle, right? I thought that was very smart. Now, I don't know how much of that was a real thing of Ray having to be convinced to do it. I don't really, because I know at one point he said he didn't really want to do a program against his son in that way. But I mean, there's a lot of good matches with reasons for them to exist, which is always a good thing. They're making the Intercontinental title seem really special now with this whole, all these wrestlers, some of whom are like formidable, on the card, who are fighting over the chance to go after Gunther's title, which now he's had for this really long period of time. There's a lot of things that feel very special on this show. And I'm not saying, you don't need to have every match be main event worthy or whatever, but just that there's a certain level of interest in every match. And I think that's what we used to expect of WrestleMania. Yeah. And I think it's happening here. It very much, look, I was there in the years where they started saying, we're going to put everybody on the card. We're going to do 14 battle royals, and we're going to do the hardcore title where 24 different people win it in the night. And we're going to do, 24/7 because everyone gets their payday and everyone's happy. And that sounds great. And it's great on paper. Maybe I sound like a jerk, but from doing that year after year after year, it has watered down the card. And I admire, again, the discipline of saying, you know what? Suck it up. I'm sorry. Some of you guys are not going to be on the card. Because again, that's the way it used to be. And you had a stronger WrestleMania card because of it. So, we're not going to just try and cram the entire roster onto the card. I think the show is going to benefit from that.
Yeah, I agree. It looks like maybe the Intercontinental title matches were, maybe they end up with a multi-person match, whether it's a ladder match or something like that. I'm fine with it. There are some people who you would like to see get on the show, but it is difficult to squeeze them on. So I don't mind. They're doing this, I guess, 5-way on Friday to build to find a challenger for Gunther. And I don't know if all those people need to be in the match, but I wouldn't mind the triple threat with Drew, Sheamus, and Gunther. I think that'd be fantastic if that's where they ended up. So I'm fine with that. We got Cena returning on Raw tonight on Monday when we're recording this, and I'm sure they're going to start building to him in Austin Theory. That seems to be the plan. Logan Paul and Seth Rollins, I think it's going to be a hell of a match. They have the chance to steal the whole weekend.
I was going to say that. I was like, this is one of the matches that I'm looking forward the most to. I mean, Logan Paul has been incredible every time that he came in. I like that, they build that match, at Elimination Chamber, it was well done. And I'm actually really excited about that match. It could actually steal the show. I mean, they have all the tools, and Seth is over, and Logan Paul is over as well. And I think that match could be fantastic. And to go back to what Brian was saying about Vince's booking or Vince's fingerprint in the booking. I mean, he hasn't been on TV. He hasn't been to any show ever since he came back, and I really don't believe that Vince McMahon is involved in any booking decisions right now. But you got to not forget that he's the one who trained Paul Levesque into that role, and that Paul Levesque didn't agree with everything that Vince agree with all of Vince's decisions. But there is some stuff that Vince was doing that probably Paul agree with it too. And a big man field match like Brock and Omos is probably one of them, because it's always been the blueprint of WWE. So to see him go that way, because the way I understood it, they were actually trying to get someone against Brock. Bobby Lashley was mentioned there. I'm not sure if Brock wanted to work with Lashley, and maybe that Levite just said, you know what, we'll give you the biggest giant we have, and Brock saw something in it, and here you go. So I'm not sure that Vince has to do anything with it for this match to happen, in the sense that Levite has been there forever, and it's a blueprint WWE WrestleMania match.
Yeah. Apparently they had wanted, I think at one point they were going to do Brock with Bray Wyatt, and what I had heard was that Brock vetoed that. And I
said Bobby Lashley. I meant Bray Wyatt, Brian. I meant Bray Wyatt. Yeah, that's the one I wanted to. Yeah, and that's why they do that DQ finish. In Montreal, because they had to put Bobby over to go against Bray Wyatt without hurting Brock too much. So I mean, but all in all, there's like very strong matches on that card. I'm not sure about the Asuka win, just because I think there's other title switch that need to be done, and you cannot have all your titles changing at Mania. And I think Rhea winning the title against Charlotte is actually more important, because I think that she is other than her act is other than Asuka right now, with that old Judgment Day and all that. And if you change the titles, the tag team titles, and if you change the Cody with Roman, and it's a lot of title changes, if you on top of that change both women's titles. So I have a reservation for that. Maybe it's gonna happen, but I would, if I have to choose between the two women's titles, I would change it for Rhea than Asuka.
Pat, you do a lot of the women's coverage for the magazine, so I want to talk about sort of women's role at this year's WrestleMania, and after a few years here of Becky and Ronda and Bianca and Charlotte kind of like moving around in different matches at WrestleMania, there was expectation that, we'd have some big payoffs this year. And it's sort of an off year for the women. There is not that big women's match this year. As we touched on, I mean, they can try to position Charlotte and Rhea that way. It just doesn't feel like that big a deal. I think the same for Asuka and Bianca, which should be very good, but I don't think a lot of people would have predicted it would have been the WrestleMania women's title match. Meanwhile, Becky is, I guess, in a tag team match. Ronda may not be on it at all. I guess that there's some question about how she's got some injuries that she's dealing with. If she is in it, she's also going to be in a tag team match. So, some of your key women's stars either in a reduced role or in marquee matches, but that just don't feel like they've got that much heat behind them.
For the longest time, I was wondering what they were doing with Becky and Bayley at WrestleMania. I was like, hey, Rhea is set, Asuka is set. What are they going to do with Becky and Bayley? So I was kind of wondering, because you had to have Becky in a marquee match or an important match at WrestleMania, right? I mean, I think the Rhea booking has been very good. I would actually have put her against Asuka at WrestleMania, but like Brian said, fantasy booking can always, you can book your own WrestleMania card.
Rhea and Asuka or Rhea and Bianca?
Rhea and Bianca. Yeah, because that's the match. I mean, we've seen Rhea and Charlotte at WrestleMania. We haven't seen Bianca and Rhea on the main roster ever. Their matches go back to NXT, but I understand the storyline with Rhea wanted her revenge on Charlotte for that NXT title loss a few years ago at Mania, so it still makes sense. The Bianca Asuka thing, I think the reward here is not the title change, it's the quality of the match. They're probably gonna have the best women's match. I'll rephrase that. They're probably gonna have one of the best matches on both nights. Period.
No question.
And that match, I think that's the reward of it. Bianca can still win, but if the match is as strong as we expect it to be, nobody will be hurt by winning or losing here.
The thing with something like that, and we've seen this happen so much, is the crowd becomes such an important part of that, and quality is not always enough if the crowd is not behind you. And I think about Charlotte's match last year with Ronda, which technically was very good, but the crowd wasn't crazy about either of them, and it wasn't really well received.
Yeah, but I mean, Asuka is in a different world as a worker than Ronda is. To be honest, to be fair. So and Bianca winning is still the babyface winning. It's not like Bianca is not over at all, So I mean, it's still
Bianca is over. Yeah, I don't. And
Bianca is over. So if she wins, I don't see the fans turning on the match, especially if they saw a great match before that. As far as Becky and Bayley, I mean, the question is, like you said, is Ronda hurt? Is it because for the longest time what we were hearing is that Ronda and Shayna was going to win the tag titles at WrestleMania. Now is she hurt enough that they want to bring her to Mania because she's a big name, but then she'll take time off so they won't put the belt on her? Or is she okay and they're going to do some kind of a three-way match, I'm guessing? Because I mean, from the moment you make Becky and Lita win the titles, they need to defend them at WrestleMania. It cannot be a 3-against-3 with Trish and Damage Control on the other side, unless you put the titles on the line still. That could be a thing as well. Another thing is can you do something else? Can you, I've read something about Trish turning heel and teaming with Bayley, and you would have maybe a 4-way tag team match. So Bayley, Trish, Damage Control, Lita and Becky, and if Ronda can work, Ronda and Shayna. That's a special match. That's at least it's a WrestleMania match, and then whoever wins, I mean, I'm not sure it really matters at that point, but at least you have 8, competitors there that you have Becky, you have Bayley, you have Ronda, you have Trish, you have Lita, you have a lot of names on that match. But I'm still wondering what they're gonna do, because the thing I don't like about this is that we're 3 weeks away from Mania, and Becky Lynch, who's supposed to be one of your biggest stars, and you still don't know exactly what she's doing. Like we know about, even though it's not confirmed, we know Seth and Logan will face, that Austin Theory will work with Cena. We still don't know what's going on with Becky, and to me it's a problem, or maybe something happened and they had a plan and it got changed. I don't know. As a promoter myself, I know that sometimes things can change last minute, but yeah, I'm just concerned that the way they booked Becky up until now and towards Mania.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll probably have some more matches finalized tonight, and certainly by the end of the week. And we still got 3 weeks to go, so I'm sure the card will come together by then. All right, thanks so much, guys. Before we head out of here, Pat, wanted to give you a chance to promote whatever you got going on. You just mentioned change in plans. I know you had a big show over the weekend.
Oh my gosh,
promotion that had some changes, right?
When you start with 17 women and you end up with only 8 being there the night of the show for reasons out of your control as a promoter, and especially the big blow was on Saturday morning. A big storm hit Toronto, and 6 of the women that were supposed to be on the show couldn't leave Toronto because they were actually driving here and they just couldn't. And safety first, as we say, shit happens, right? But we have to, me and my co-promoter, we had to retain the card, and we didn't have any more women to actually book, so we were partners with NSPW in Quebec City, and we asked some men to cover up, and ended up with 5 matches with both men and women. I mean, some all women matches there still, but other intergender matches. And wow, did the crowd loved every single one of those matches, and the reception was great, and we're very, very, I mean, I definitely had a better Saturday evening than the Saturday morning, let me tell you this. So yeah, I mean, life of a promoter, right? But yeah, aside from that, obviously you can read, and I'll have a story about this in the PWI actually in one of the next issues. Kevin wants me to write about that everything that happened between the pandemic and Femme Fatale show that we had last Saturday. I also have my column Coast to Coast about all the Canadian wrestling scene, and yeah, other projects here in Montreal, maybe a book on its way, and congrats, Brian, for the Gorilla Monsoon book.
Thank you.
I wish I had that idea actually. So that's a great book that's gonna deliver. And I have talks as well with ECW Press. So maybe an announcement too on my side in a few weeks, hopefully.
Great.
And you can always reach me on social media at Pat Laprade, pretty much everywhere: Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and all that.
Yeah, a couple things to congratulate Brian on. He also won the Wrestling Observer Award for Best Wrestling Book of the Year for his book on the street.
Welcome to the club, Brian.
I know. I'm just glad that nobody in AEW wrote a book last year. That's very promising. No, but I mean, I really still thought that was going to be Brian Gewirtz, just also because, I mean, everybody knows who he is. That's the kind of thing. And it's those behind the scenes stories of WWE that people love. But, I think it was a lot of word of mouth. I worked my ass off for like 2 years to get the word out on this book. And I'm glad it kind of worked. Of course, it's for the Sheik book that I wrote, Blood and Fire. It won the award. And I'm just, I really, really, really did not expect it. And it just wound up coincidentally being the same week that I signed the contract for the next book. So I was able to, I don't like to make anything public until something is signed and I know it's happening, because I think I've been around wrestling so long that I'm very, very paranoid, and I'm always thinking somebody's going to try to sabotage whatever. No, really, truly, especially when it's something that's somewhat WWE adjacent like that, but I'm able to say it. The book's going to be called Irresistible Force: The Life and Times of Gorilla Monsoon. And I'm just this week really now digging into starting to reach out to people and like forming ideas in my head. The thing about it is, and I have to give credit, because like Pat, you said that you wish that you had thought of it. I mean, I got to be very honest. When Blood and Fire came out, I did a ton of podcast appearances. And on one of them, I happened to be on a show with Dr. Mike Lano, the inestimable Dr. Mike Lano. And people could say what they want about him. But we were having our conversations on there. And he goes, we were thinking of it. He was like, what's your next book going to be? And he mentioned Gorilla Monsoon's name. And I had this epiphany of just this moment of clarity, like, oh my God. It's so simple and so perfect, because it's someone who's never had a book done. They're an absolutely, totally mainstream name among any wrestling fan from their 30s on. And yet it also gives me the opportunity to do what I love, which is to really get into the old school history, the territories, and the pre-expansion days. And there's not a lot of people that fulfill that Venn diagram where you get to do the old school, but you also are confident that this is a person that's known enough that people will be interested in the book beyond just wrestling historians, So it was just like this perfect sweet spot of an idea. I also think because he was a much more beloved, to be totally frank, a much more beloved figure than the Sheik was behind the scenes with a lot of people, that it's going to be a very different kind of a book. It's going to be a book about somebody who was really universally loved and admired, and not so much a book about, this kind of mysterious, flawed person that we know nothing about. Like a very, very different kind of story, which I'm looking forward to doing.
And who can actually say that they have a location named after their first name, the Gorilla position. I mean, yes. I'm wondering how many people don't know where the Gorilla Position name come from, and I'm sure you're going to talk about it in the book, but I mean, that was an incredible idea.
Are you already in contact with surviving family members? Anything like that? I know that was a real challenge with the Sheik. I expect it'll be hopefully a little bit better here, right?
I'm really hoping. I'm very shell shocked. I have PTSD from the last book of just the family was not super enthused, and I was not their favorite person. I wouldn't say that there was any kind of like outward animosity. Well, there was a little bit maybe, but I have reached out to Gorilla's family, and I don't want to jinx anything. I mean, they seem like wonderful people. He has 2 daughters. His wife is actually still with us, and Maureen, and I'm hoping that it's sort of they're I haven't gotten an answer yet, but I know they're very excited. They're very excited. It's not like we're Sheik's family where it was all like, because, well, again, to be frank, like with Sheik, there were many, many skeletons in the closet, and the family was very protective and very defensive. And I think with Gorilla, it's not so much the skeletons in the closet. I think it's more, our dad was just a very, very private person, and he didn't really give interviews like that. They didn't have shoot interviews back then. He was an old school guy. He kept kayfabe. I mean, they were still saying he was from Manchuria, even in like the 80s and 90s, So it's more that I think they're very excited the book is happening, and I think they're just sort of putting their heads together to decide what level of involvement they want to have. But I'd be excited for just whatever they want to do, even if it's just photographs, just whatever they can contribute, I would be thrilled about.
Yeah. Well, a lot to look forward to there. Thank you so much, guys. As always, it's a lot of fun. Everybody head on over to PWI-online.com to check out the latest issue, and look forward to talking to you again. Take care, everybody.
All right.